a quick introduction. We have, as a group, we are involved in 4 businesses. One is power backup business, which is Luminous Power Technologies, which is Asia's largest power backup company, and operating in about 32 countries in Asia, Africa, and LATAM. Then we have telecom infra business. We have a KPO business, which is in the engineering design space. We have actually a factory in China, and which is the heart of clusters. So I'm kind of going to use some of my experience of and learnings from that activity to touch upon how collaborative competition really can work, and how it can create ability to compete with large enterprises by smaller companies on a fairly equal footing. So that's something that we'll touch upon. We also have a business in electric drivetrains, which has just been started, which is for electric vehicles, which is a new company. Let me touch quickly upon what collaborative competition actually can achieve. So I'm coming to the conclusion before starting to talk about it. That helps us sort of appreciate it better a little bit maybe. So collaborative competition, in my view, would help raise overall efficiency of the industry as a whole in the first place, which means you are anyway starting from a higher benchmark and therefore are that much more competitive. It invariably gives a significant advantage to everybody who's part of that process in collaboration. And I mean, this is the theory part of it, but we'll get to some of the practical stuff. Then there is, of course, there is no limitation, like Mr. Mittal was talking about, on any individual company, even if it is in a collaborative process, to actually innovate and focus on the customer and differentiate what it does in a way that the customer likes it a lot and prefers that brand, or looks at it differently than the rest of the competition. But I think as a thought, frankly, collaboration or rather cooperation and competition really exists together. It's effectively one and the same thing at the end of the day. Because if you really look at it, competing is anyway a human nature. I mean, we are all going to compete any which way, whether it is personal level or whether it is professional level or whatever we call it, or at an enterprise level. In any case, competition does bring out excellence. There is no question about that. That's been proven beyond doubt. Mr. Mittal brought tractors of a different quality level, and I'm sure that changed even his older and relatively less proactive competitors to do better over time. And competition does build character. We've seen that. We heard Mr. Mittal out, and we saw how much of a character there was in that whole thought. So, I mean, actually when 2, 3, 5, 10 competitors, let's say even in a sport, when they are competing with each other, I mean, are they not actually cooperating in helping the other fellow who's competing with them to set a benchmark and actually look at his own performance with reference to that benchmark and therefore improve? So in a way, while competing, you are actually cooperating. And this is a thought which in sport works very well. In fact, a lot of sports psychologists have actually used this to enhance performance in a big way. And it has been used a lot in sports. And there's nothing more competitive than, let's say, an athletic sport where there is everything to be decided in those 10 seconds or 15 or 20 or 30 seconds. So in my view, I mean, my thought here is that, and which I would like all of you to look at, is that competition and cooperation actually by nature exist together. So therefore, if we extend that thought into real collaboration from cooperation, I think there is a lot to be gained, and there will be some examples we'll pull out of the Chinese way of doing it. So Chinese industry clusters, I mean, a lot has been talked about it, and as young students here, you probably have heard a little about it, but as you get into business life or entrepreneurship in your own way, you will find that, this is a pretty famous base for Chinese industry to have actually competed globally very well with large companies, with smaller rivals in other countries, etc., etc. It's not that they are very smart companies as individual companies, but they do compete very aggressively whilst collaborating at a cluster level. And the government actually had a lot to do with pushing this whole thing in that direction. And if you really look at Chinese industry, it is typically always in clusters. I mean, you will find one city which is known for one type of business. So you have a Shenzhen for consumer electronics, you have a Qingdao for tires, you have Suzhou for professional electronics, you will have all kinds of places. I mean, this list is endless, absolutely. I mean, and you know, by virtue of this cluster benefit, they have actually been able to compete with large multinationals or even large local corporations, you know, and grown into bigger companies from starting small. And close to about 60-65% of the GDP in China from the industrial production side comes from these clusters. So the real benefits for small companies in the clusters is that they get the benefit of cost and quality on, you know, parts, components, sub-assemblies, which is otherwise available only to very large scale manufacturers. Here they share those component suppliers or resources and aggregate their volumes into those part suppliers, and therefore are able to access high quality and a better supply chain. Also lowers their capital investment, which is again a big issue for small companies. They don't have enough money to really go into a fully integrated kind of an activity. There is also a lower supply chain and working capital cost. You don't really spend that much, you don't really have to spend that much money for working capital because your supplier is right next door. He can give you all that support. And it shares, you know, the capital is also shared between all these people who work together in a cluster. There, of course, is higher scalability, and then you also get credibility with customers, which gets built more as a cluster location than as an individual company. So, you know, when somebody from Africa wants to buy tires, he goes to Qingdao. Now, once he lands in Qingdao, he decides which tire company to buy it from, but he at least gets to Qingdao. So therefore, as a brand, which is a big issue while competing with large companies or multinationals, this becomes a good starting point for a customer to start working with you. I think we haven't yet gotten to that point where we can easily partner with each other. We still have that issue about, you know, not being able to differentiate competition and collaboration, part of the same story though. And we still are fighting that mindset, and I guess that is probably going to be the single biggest change that is going to be needed if we have to do what the whole world is saying. You know, India will be the next factory of the world. China already is. India would be the next factory. I really think that unless there is this mindset change that we can bring about, there is it's a very difficult task to actually compete with the Chinese manufacturers in India. Though you have lower labor costs here, we have enough supply of labor, enough local market, all of that is there, but you know, still we need to overcome this mindset issue of not being able to collaborate while competing if we have to come out and become a, you know, sort of a factory to the world the way people are thinking we would. So these are already proven examples that are there. So as we go along, I guess this landscape is supposed to change here as well in India, and I wish that it does. And SMEs will really be the biggest beneficiaries of this change of landscape and mindset, which is likely to happen. Just wanted to share this much with you. Be open for questions. Thank you.